Welcome, everybody, to our quick Collabs podcast here at Awesomeness, where we meet with educators from all around the globe to talk about topics right out of the classroom. Today, we're delighted to welcome Anne van Dam and Fiona Zinn, two internationally respected voices in early childhood and primary education. Both of these wonderful women are passionate about play-based learning, learner agency, and creating environments where children truly thrive. And Hannah and I, we can't wait to dive into their insights and their experiences today and just get to know them a little bit better. So welcome, Anne and Fiona.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
I wonder if you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you and Fiona actually started collaborating back in Singapore.
You know what it's like, hey, life has its twists and turns. So first time I lived overseas was actually this was 1993. I lived in China for 2 years, right? So it's this life of going out of your home country, back to your home country, Switzerland, Singapore, etc., etc. Many different roles, different identities, etc. But at the moment, I work as an educational consultant from Singapore, working with schools across the world. Mm-hmm. How about you, Fee? You want to talk about what you do first before we tell the story of the first time we encountered each other?
I do love our story. So, yes, so my work for many years has been a mix of working in schools. So I currently work in a school in a middle leadership role as a deputy head here in Hobart. But over the last sort of 25, 30 years, I've worked in different school roles in leadership in the classroom, in different places, but a lot of the work that I've done as a consultant in my spare time, as you do, weekends and holidays, has been working with international schools. And so I've had the great honour and joy of working with people from all around the globe on some of the things that are sticky in their practice, some of the ideas and tensions, and working through some of the practices that they would like to think about reinventing. So Anna and I met. Can I start the story and then you can finish it, perhaps, Anna? Anna and I first met, I have to think it was about 2003, 2004. We're a bit sketchy on the dates. And at that stage, my day job was working at a school in Melbourne, and I was leading workshops for the International Baccalaureate and a few other people around the place. And so I was leading this workshop alongside some other workshop leaders in Singapore at a lovely school there. And there was this woman in the audience sitting at a table with her team. And oh my goodness, I kept walking past this table of early childhood teachers thinking, wow, she really knows what she's talking about. And so I remember being quite awestruck probably by the participant that was sitting in this workshop. And then fast forward a couple of months, the IB sent me my next workshop to lead, and you lead them with co-leaders. And they said, and your co-leader is going to be Anne van Dam. And I remember being quite terrified because here was this incredibly clever teacher who sat in the workshop who was suddenly going to co-lead. And since that day, we've had lots of opportunities to collaborate in different places, but we've never lived in the same place at the same time. So it's a friendship across the miles. How did that feel for you, Anna?
It's really, really special. And I think that there is something about that initial connection, because I had that same feeling. I was like awestruck, I think is that the word? I was like struck by this lady here. It's like, whoa, she's clever. And I want to understand how she thinks. And you had this beautiful story about your classroom practice. It was just, for me, it was really something that I was working towards, like understanding inquiry and the role of materials, relationships, documentation. So the admiration really came from me, I think, Fee. But what was interesting, I think, is through the years as we were collaborating and meeting each other at conferences and in different places in the world where we would like lead workshops and then meet each other in the evening, go out for dinner, etc., that we started having conversations about all the resources that we would have to bring to places that we would go and support professional learning for teams. And that, there is this article about learning spaces that we loved, or this book about leadership, or this beautiful resource for learning spaces. And we were kind of thinking, wouldn't it be great if it would be in one book? So this is how the idea of the book was born. And we at some point thought, well, maybe we need to write this book. But I think it's also kind of fascinating that like those initial ideas, and then if I look at what the book has become, you know, that's been it's a journey in itself, I think. I'm not sure how you feel about that, Fee.
Oh, that's absolutely so true. That we talk in the book about the journey that makes the path. It's the process of engaging in the journey. As we know, working in inquiry schools, that it's the process of constructing something together that actually tells you where you will land. And I think if we had written a description of the book we thought we were writing when we started, mind you, we've been talking about writing for about 10 years, but we've actually got our act together in the last 2 or 3. But if we wrote the blurb or the description of the book then, and we look at the book that we're almost about to hold in our hands, they're 2 different books, because along the way, some of the stories that lifted up to the surface and the stepping stones from one idea to the next took it in a completely different direction. So, you know, it's one of those things that the joy is in the process, and the product is really important. The product is not important, but we have absolutely enjoyed the process.
I think it's so wonderful how we all come from different places, and then like randomly you meet somewhere, and your story is so beautiful about like connecting over and over again and having that same fascination and even passion together, and then staying connected and then writing that book. I'm so curious to hear more about the book. I know it has been a real journey, and Fiona, you talked about it's interesting how you plan for something and it's this process that's important. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more, like the title of the book. And what is this book about? What are readers, what can they expect?
Well, this is a really interesting thing, because for a long time we knew that we wanted part of the title to be developing a shared pedagogy. But of course, that's educator speak. And what that is, the whole book is about bringing teams together and working out how you want to teach together. What is your definition of children, of childhood, of teaching, of learning, of assessment, of learning environments? But we grappled with, we knew it needed 2 parts to the title. And for a long time, many months, we grappled with this bit or that bit. We knew it would say developing a shared pedagogy, but we didn't know what to put in the front. And it was through the process of writing that we came across, and we remembered really that there are many ancient cultures around the world that have ancient practices of wayfinding. And we were talking about that as a metaphor for bringing your practice together, for developing your shared pedagogy. And then we were in Hong Kong at a conference and staying on to do some writing the week afterwards. We had a lovely week of writing in the same place at the same time, very rare in our lives. And we looked at each other one day and said, this is about finding our way. And so the book landed on its own title. It almost found us in a way, because there's this lovely illusion of wayfinding through the book. There's this little metaphor that drifts through the book about how you chart your path, and the ancient art of wayfinding is about navigating by the stars, and you look at where you have come from in order to know where you're going. And that's exactly what we did as we were writing the book. We were looking back at the things we'd written and trying to work out what came next, and the book title just kind of landed in our laps.
If you think about this idea of an elevator pitch, you could say it's a self-help book for teams, right? and really supporting educators in schools, leaders, teachers, etc., to really think really deeply about what is it that they believe about children, what is it that they believe about learning, and what are the practices that are, what's that word, aligned, congruent with these really deeply held beliefs. So in some ways you could read that book quite sort of like in a linear way. You start with the first chapter about what it means to collaborate, and then you start unpacking how we look at children, what we believe about their learning. But you could also start with a chapter about time, or like delve into a chapter about learning spaces. So you can use the resource also in many different ways. And we're really hoping that teams are going to use this book together and find a way through the book, that suits where they're at in their journey.
And it was through the journey of writing for the teams that we actually realized we were writing for leaders. And this messaging about leadership kept rising to the surface, and we kept thinking, oh, but we've written a book about leadership.
Fiona, it's interesting you said this, because when I read your introduction in the first chapter, I felt like, oh, this is actually a message for me and how I should lead our teams. And it's all about collaboration and trust. And I felt like there was so much, even just in the first chapter. I love the idea of having like a self-help book and like being able to pop into one chapter and then go to the other one, picking what you need. Fiona, you talked about constellation a little bit, and I know that's a metaphor I saw at the beginning of your book, and it's such a beautiful one. I wonder if you can explain it a little bit more, the idea of constellation, collaboration, building trust in relationships.
It's a really central theme throughout the book as a metaphor for practice, but also as a metaphor for the way in which a team comes together. And a constellation as such it's an idea that the humans have come up with. A constellation exists because we give it a concept to hang on. And a constellation, if you use that as the metaphor for a team coming together, also exists because we give the team an identity. So in a sense, it's the story that belongs to the team, but also it highlights this notion that no one works in isolation, that you can't be a constellation if you are a single star. And you become a constellation because you are in relationship with others around you. And it is the relationships between you that define the type of group that you are. So this beautiful wayfinding that we've delved into and researched, these ancient practices of wayfinding and using the stars, helped us to understand that the team itself is the constellation, and no one star is more important than another. So we've lent into and borrowed from that metaphor right the way throughout the book, but we feel that it helps us to see how individual teachers can still be individuals. They can still bring their passions and talents and skills and beliefs, but when they come to be in relationship with one another, then things change.
It's such a strong metaphor, this idea of the constellation, because it really is about the lines between the stars, right? So really thinking about like that through the relationships, the trust, the collaboration, and these all kind of amplify and intersect with each other, right? I think it's through that, that like the constellation becomes stronger and stronger. And I think that's a really beautiful idea. So you have to start somewhere, right? Like I think we often talk about collaboration, but I think like it is with having the conversations, really grappling with the idea, thinking about ways that you want to use materials, unpacking documentation together. I think it really is through the work that you actually do together that you build the relationships, that you build the trust, that you develop the shared understandings, and that takes time, right? But I think that's really how that idea of the team as a constellation really becomes a reality, so to say. Like just now, I'm working with a school, and we've spent 2 hours talking about who these people are and what they bring to the context. And that was such an important thing to do at the beginning of the visit for me to understand who are these people, but also through this engagement that they deepened their understanding of each other and who they are as a collective. And that was so important to do at the beginning of the visit. Like, so I think it's these kind of practices that really help the team to become a constellation.
I feel like that seems so important for like leadership to also create this space for teachers to have that team. Because I think sometimes there's so much on the to-do list that teachers are squeezing in time to get together. But if schools can really give them chunks to form those relationships, it's so important.
And I wonder, I know in your book you talk a lot about, like, you know, how educators they come with different backgrounds, with different beliefs, different trainings. And this idea of a team sounds so beautiful, but knowing that in a team you have all those different personalities, how do you help teams create that vision? Because we know, right, we all have seen teams that work really well together. They have the same vision, the same ideas. And then we have teams who are asked to work together, but they are still kind of like their own little stars and not really that constellation you talk about. So I wonder, how do we bring teams with all those different backgrounds really together, and how do they create one vision?
If you don't mind me jumping in, Anna, it's exactly what Anna just said. It's about making time. And I know that we have all, and I'm sure your listeners have all, come to new positions in new schools and been kind of thrown in the thick of it really quickly. And it's busy. The beginning of a school year is really busy. It's hard to be new. It's hard to work out whether the identity of education you had that you've traveled with is going to fit here, and how does this new place work? It's about going slowly, and it's about taking time to come to know one another, because if we don't invest that time, then we can't start to work out who we are when we are together. We're all changed. As Vygotsky says, we come to become ourselves through others. And it's through the unique combination of teachers around you and where they have been and where they were trained and where they work now, and some of their childhood memories or their values of what they think childhood is will shape the things that they do with children. And if we don't take that time to bring those perspectives together, we run the risk of working in isolation, we run the risk of working in silos, but we also run the risk of missing opportunities that are right beside us that will help us grow. And so if we don't lean into those relationships, we can't grow from the things that others share with us. They're not always happy things. Sometimes they are, as you were saying before, there's a bit of a rub, there's a bit of friction there. Those are the most fertile spaces where we can all walk away with a changed understanding.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful, Fee, the way you talk about this sense of ownership that educators need to have of the program in their early childhood centers, classrooms, etc., and that they have to develop that together. I think there's another piece to it, and that really is a crucial role of leadership in terms of perhaps some parameters around that identity. Like, I think it's important that schools have visions around learning and the identity of the learners, right? Like, so setting up some parameters there, I think, is important. Because it's not anything goes, I think. It's also important to be guided by deep values and by research. What do we know about children? What do we value about education? And I think some of these big pieces are going to create some parameters for the development of the team. Like, so we're working with this notion of conceptual inquiry. That might be a parameter that already sort of guides the team towards a certain way of working. Or, yeah, like, I think that is also important as a leader to be sort of cognizant of some of those parameters. Also in conversations with teachers when they come, like, so this is what we're about, or this is what we want to be about, and this is what we're researching together. Because otherwise, like, there would be such a range of possibilities that it might be hard to really find common ground. But it's a fine line, isn't it? Because as a leader, you don't want to prescribe, and this is what we're doing. And I think the beautiful challenge really is to have ideas that still allow for a team to find its own identity within it. Within this, like what that speaks to that team, that environment, that context. But like, it needs to be situated. I think that's what I'm trying to say, like, with lots of ownership.
And Anna, I wonder, right, because I think when you talk to teachers, often they would say, like, yes, we want to work together, but we just have never time to meet. And I know in your book, you talk about certain structures, you can implement in a classroom or in a school. And I'm thinking of the think tank you talk about. I wonder if you could let us explore that think tank idea a little bit more, but also really looking at those structures. How do we put them in place without adding more to the plate. Teachers already have this massive workload, and adding like, now we're all going to connect, and they're like, just leave me alone. I have a to-do list. I don't need to talk to my team. So I wonder what kind of intentional moves we can make as leaders, but in schools too, to really foster that collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting question, this whole notion of how do we foster collaboration. And perhaps it starts there, like really identifying collaboration as a deep value and unpacking, you know, why does that matter? And goes back to this idea of the constellations. Together, people are just a lot smarter. And they achieve a lot more. I've always been amazed by the power of collaboration. It just blows my mind away what happens when ideas start to intersect. Together, we're just more powerful. So that idea of collaboration is a very powerful strategy and value in education, unpacking that and then thinking, if this is our value and we know why this is important, then if we want to think about time and really thinking about it, we want to spend our lives in ways that honors our values, then we have to think about, okay, what can we do to make sure that people come together during the day? Mm-hmm. That's really about, okay, if this is our value, then how can we ensure that we spend our time the way we, you know, that honors our values, and then thinking about systems and practices that honor that. Mm-hmm. And schools do that in different ways. Like I've seen schools where specialist teachers and teaching assistants would be outside with the children a big chunk of the time so that the homeroom teachers can step out and plan together. I've also seen teams where people plan in the middle of the day where some of the children are napping. It really depends on your context, I think, but really thinking about your rhythm of the day and finding moments where teams can come together, where people can come together. I think the other thing would be is to think about maybe at the end of the day when the children are going home, is to carve out time where everybody can come together maybe once a week and have some of those robust conversations. It's really thinking that through, I think, as a team and as leaders. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking, Fee? What's on your mind?
I'm also thinking that I agree with everything you've said there. I think if we don't preserve the time or protect the time, then we won't have the time to reflect on how we could work differently. And then the risk is we just keep doing what we've always been doing. And then when something new comes in, or a new agenda or a new work to be done, it just goes on top of the pile. And teachers feel really overworked and burdened, and they are doing a lot of things. But if we take that time to come together and question what really matters, what sits at the heart of our work, what do we have to do from a compliance point of view, because compliance is important. But if we analyze our working patterns and structures and our agendas together, and we land on that definition of what's important together, then we have an opportunity to change how we work. And if we change how we work, we will feel less burdened. But I also, in listening to you, Anna, I was thinking about a couple of schools that I've worked with where they don't have the luxury of a team because each year level is taught by a different teacher and they don't have colleagues in the same year level to teach with. And I can remember vividly early in my career where I was in a situation in a school where I was the only early childhood teacher. And I needed this is when I first realized I really needed collaboration in order to come to work every day, because I could not work in isolation. It just didn't work for me. And so I actually found a like mind in the school, and it was the year 6 teacher. And I said to him, I know I teach the 4-year-olds and you teach the 12-year-olds, but I really like the way you think. And he's like, yeah, what you do down there in the early years is so cool. And I said, I'm going to buy you coffee once a week before school. We're going to meet half an hour before school on a Friday. And I'm going to bring one question to you. Can you bring one question to me? And I just want to lean into year 6 and you can lean into the early childhood. And so in a sense, we found our collaboration, but where there was no kind of working together on it. We were a sounding board for each other. But that was what got me through that year. That was what got me through that situation where I felt so isolated. So there are teachers out there that work in schools that can sometimes feel that too. But there are still opportunities to preserve time for dialogue and discussion and reflection. And it's really, really important that we don't see the limitations around that, but we see that as a space of possibility.
You know, early childhood educators, primary school educators, you know, I feel like you have such a strong belief in like students and how they are meaningful, and we should lean into what they have to think. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about this, like the student agency, the idea of collaboration, you know, because I hear a lot of collaboration. I'm thinking like teacher collaboration, teacher parent meet maybe, but how does the collaboration with the children actually come in?
I think this is a beautiful thing to talk about. Like it starts with really acknowledging that young children learn in this, they experience the world really through a web of relationships. So I think all early childhood educators across the world understand this often, like you see early childhood educators, they're so committed to building really deep relationships with children of trust and with their families. I think this is a really deeply held belief in early childhood. So there is something, I think, about you know, that commitment that resonates very deeply with early childhood educators. Like young children particularly need to feel safe in order to play, and I think when that happens, something magical just happens. Like children are just such amazing, vivacious, relentless learners. Like that is just so captivating, I think. So spaces and materials and time and relationships and the interactions that children have with these materials, with each other, with these adults. Yeah, something really magical happens there, I think, that is about meaning making, about making sense of the world, about researching, about giving meaning to our experience. And children do that in very dynamic ways. And it's just such a joy, I think, to be alongside children, just give you a glimpse inside their thinking. And that happens in a number of ways. That can be through the way that they are stacking the blocks, the way they making a drawing, or the way they are talking about their experience. Just yesterday, I was sharing some documentation from the time I was back in the classroom a couple of years ago. And I remember having a conversation with the children about, like, how do you know somebody's your friend? And one of the children looked at me and he said, like, but you just know it. And I thought that was just so profound, right? And then he said, like, I'm going to know this for a long time, right? Like, it's just really beautiful, I think, when you get these insights and glimpses of children's thinking, their worlds, their identities, the ways that they construct meaning. It's really, really enriching and beautiful.
One of the great gifts of working in early childhood, I mean, having started in a primary career and moved down to early childhood, saw the light, you know, decided to work it with the younger children. Somehow it gives you permission to be brave. And it gives you permission to be brave with the way in which you honor the children's agency. And there is space, there is time, there is creativity, there is play. But in lots of the work that we've both done with teams of teachers around the world, they do talk a lot about agency in the early childhood years. And I'm sure they talk about agency all the way across the school continuum. But when I have heard teachers talk about agency, I hear them talk about empowering children and letting children have agency, which would imply that we were the keepers of the power in the first place. And if we don't let them have it, then they don't have it. But agency exists inside the child when they come in the gate. Agency is in them. And if we choose to honor that and recognize that and support that, then we let their agency come out. But the other thing that I see teachers talking about is, and it sometimes sits a little bit uncomfortably with me, is that if we let the children's agency rise, then all we have to do to make that happen is we step back. They say we need to step back from the children. We need to let their agency rise. But we kind of believe in the many months and years that we've been talking about this, wrestling with this over many dinners in different countries, Anna and I believe that in order to recognize that the children's agency is stepping up, we have to step up to meet them. So if we step back, then they are on their own. And the agency is in the collective. It's in the children's relationships with each other. It's in the teachers' relationships with each other. So in a sense, the children have agency, but the teachers also have agency. If we don't plan rigorous programs in response to what they are saying and learning and doing and wondering about, then their wonderings will fall flat. So there's this negotiation of the agency where we all have to recognize that we have to step up. And alongside that, the curriculum has to have agency. And the learning environment has to have agency. And the learning community has to have agency. Because without any one of these forces, something's missing. So agency is a really complex topic to think about, and it's a very hard thing to define, but we believe it's inside the child when they walk into the school in the morning.
Yeah, and I think you said some really profound things, Fee, about the children's agency and our agency and responsibility to plan in response, to plan in such ways that we're really honoring their thinking, their curiosities, their pursuits, etc. So again, this is complex work. Okay? Same with teams and leaders and finding your way together. I think in the interactions with the children, really deeply thinking about the children and the depth of their pursuit, what ideas are underpinning these investigations, what's going on, and thinking about ways that we can support the children in that research, right? I think that's really important. I think the other thing that I wanted to build on, Fee, is really, around this notion of agency, is honoring children really as bearers of rights. And this goes back to, the way that we think about children. Children have the right to be involved in decisions that affect them. And when you start thinking about the impact of a statement like that, like in the way that most schools are run, we have a lot of doing to children, where you sit on the carpet, where you eat your lunch, what you eat, how we celebrate our parties, but also, this is what you're learning right now. And don't get me wrong, right? There is a rhythm of the day, moments where we open up and reduce choice depending on the age of the children, but really deeply thinking about ways that children are very involved. And honoring their rights, I think, is a really deep value that runs throughout the book.
And I think it's so interesting, I think the idea of agency is so important. And I know in our school and other schools we worked in, we often hear teachers talk the talk, but it's so hard to walk the walk. And I know one thing, Hannah, Caitlin, and I, when we do workshops, we hear is like, that all sounds great, but there's just no time for it. Or often it's like, they ask the children, what do you want to know about this unit? And they ask all those questions and they put them up on the wall, but then I continue with what I planned in my retreat for this unit. And I wonder, hearing you, and it sounds like, once you really tap into student agency, how the magic really develops. I wonder, is there any kind of advice or little strategy you could share with teachers who listen to it and be like, this all sounds great, but I'm really feeling the pressure of curriculum and I don't have that time and I don't know how to balance the belief in agency is important, but also the pressure of curriculum. Like, what can we tell educators?
Sometimes I say to school, why don't you, to schools, particularly if they're PYP schools and they've got these units of inquiry, why don't you think about think about these units as something that you can actually explore in child-initiated play? Because it opens up the day, right? You don't have to do the unit. You're learning about the unit while you're playing. So often those are quite broad, big exploration around belonging, responsibility, what it means to play together, to get to know materials, a unit about imagination, the nature of materials. Those are units, I think, that can be explored through play quite easily. And it opens up the day and it gives you an opportunity to learn more about play. And then through that, spaces, materials, the kind of interactions, how teachers dip into and out of different roles. When do we observe? When do we document? How do we facilitate? How do we join children in their play explorations and initiatives? So you have to find a way in, even if it's just 1 hour in the day. How about you, Fee? What was
and absolutely right there with you in that moment. That's exactly the freedom that comes with opening up the day gives you the permission to be brave and to listen. It gives you the space and the time to listen. And if we create these big, busy, timetabled, structured programs for very young children, and we push them through predetermined things at predetermined times, we're too busy running the schedule to stop and listen to the thinking of the children. But that's the secret sauce. Because if we sit in the space with the children in the play, whatever it is that we might have set up or curated with the children and that they're deeply invested in, then we can take notes and document. And then we can take those notes to our team and we can unpack them and interpret them. Because if you are documenting children's learning, as we all do in the early years, in early childhood around the world, documentation is a critical practice. But too often we see teachers that are documenting to record what was done, to record what was said, to record what we know. And quite often the question that they say is, what do you know about? What do you know about the farm? Or what do you know about the stars? Or what do you know about the weather? But actually, the process of documentation is for us to find out what we don't know. And so we become the curious ones as we lean into what the children are saying. And then we take it back to our teams and go, oh my goodness, do you know that we've got 3 different theories on how clouds are made? And maybe none of them are scientific. Maybe that's the space that leaves open the door for further inquiry. But now we've got something we can work with. Now we can go and find some experiments to do or some materials to pull together or a picture storybook that might lend us into an Indigenous conversation about how clouds are born. Or it really is about us becoming the curious ones to dig into how children build knowledge, not just what they know.
Because then what you'll discover is that these children come every day with amazing ideas, theories, points of view, rich experiences that when you start to unpack them, like can inform you of where to go next, right? In ways that supports that thinking, right? Broadens, challenges that thinking, deepens that thinking. And that's a beautiful journey that enhances the thinking of the children, but also your art, your skills as an educator, hey? As you're designing experiences for children in response to their thinking. It's very rich. Particularly if you do that with other colleagues, you get the different perspectives on what's going on and what might be ways forward. And it really makes us stronger educators, I think.
I think where that leaves us, Anna, is what is the role of the curriculum? You know, we've got this beautiful practice on this side where we're leaning in and listening, and there's time and space and creativity and deep responsiveness about they bring an idea, we toss it around, we take it to planning, we come back, we launch a provocation or a proposal or something. But then there's this big thing sitting on your shoulder that says, hey, I'm the curriculum and I need to be taught, I need to be learned, I need to be assessed. And sorry, it's caricature of the curriculum. It's about reconceptualizing the way we see and understand the curriculum. So I often talk about this as the curriculum is the pantry of ingredients that we can cook the meal, and we have choice about what meal we cook. We can make a very quick meal that's fast food and fast learned and fast assessed and fast digested and it's all fast. Or we can make a slow 10-course degustation menu along a theme and get to know seasonal ingredients. It's the same ingredients in the pantry, but it's how you curate that. So for us, the curriculum is your menu, if you like. The curriculum is your opportunity to curate learning experiences. And sometimes you deliberately pull something in. And sometimes the children talk about something that you think, we weren't going to do that for months, but let's bring that in now. It's this deep responsiveness but not losing sight of the curriculum that you have.
Something that I really hear loud and clearly is this idea of collaboration and relationship with anyone, like the children, in teams, adults and children together. I feel like it ties so nicely back to like the beginning of this conversation about the importance of relationship and trust and taking the time. And I wonder, Anna and Fiona, people who are going to read your book, what do you hope they're going to get out of it? What do you hope what are you hoping for that the readers walk away with?
Goodness.
Well, I think what I hope that people walk away with is really a deepened bravery and trust in their own capacity to do this work with the colleagues and with children. Mm-hmm. And I'm also hoping that they're walking away with a deeper understanding of who children are, what their rights are, and perhaps also a deeper understanding of how they're looking at children right now and what might be some possibilities when we start thinking about this more deeply, when we start unpacking ways that we've been influenced, what has influenced our way of looking at children. So that would be, I think, my hope for the book, right? Trusting yourself and your colleagues in this process, and a deeper connection to the vitality of children.
I think that we hope that the book, by engaging with the book, is full of many, many tools. So there's tools that you can take to a staff meeting, or tools you can do with your team, or some tools are short, half an hour, and some learning engagements are much longer, over time, over months. Maybe you might come back and revisit them. And what we hope is that leaders and their teams will find time to engage not just with the chapter content and the big conceptual stuff that we wrestle with, but they will take the time to be practical with each other and to take the theory and bend it into the practice. And through the process of working through some of these tools and these thinking points and these lenses for leaders that we offer, we hope that this book will facilitate an understanding in the team that the power actually lies in the work and the work being done together. So when we talk about finding our way, it's not finding your way on your own. It's not finding the leader finding the way and giving the way to the team. It's finding your way together. So we hope that it brings teams closer together in their work.
Okay, that is such a beautiful sentence to round it all up, and going back to the idea of constellations. Anna and Fiona, it was such a pleasure to talk to you and learn a little bit more about the book. Thank you so much for being our guest today, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you. It's just really wonderful to have a conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, gorgeous, just gorgeous. Thank you.